What I often say to students is that we're interested obviously in making things, but we're also interested in breaking things. We like to break things because we're curious about what happens inside. We want to kind of look within and understand the way things work. In the studios, we always have a vibrant scene of visiting tutors. So there's continuous discussion and excitement around what's possible. We have bespoke studios closely connected to technical services workshops. There's a lift that goes between the studios and technical services. We're very interested in engagement, working with communities too, outside of the studios, outside of the art school, also even outside of the UK. And we have a number of partnerships that help us to establish the kind of work our students are doing amongst a range of audiences.
Everyone comes here with an open mindset and this energy that are willing to connect, to get things done. And it's very easy to find community and to find a network. I feel very at ease and normal. And I feel the freedom to just talk about anything in my practice. I think it's a pretty magical space that you most likely don't get again in life when you work next to like-minded people. And you can immediately talk about things, you can exchange thoughts, and that pushes your practice further. And I think it's motivating to come back every day when you see everyone coming back to the studio every day and just being here all the time. It's different from having a studio by yourself.
We want people who can take risks, be playful, fun, challenge orthodoxy, be ready to make mistakes and embrace the potential of failure through constantly trying and challenging what they can do and what the medium and this institution can do. At the same time, they need to be able to critically reflect on that. So you have to be able to connect it to a bigger picture historically, which is going to enable you to look into the future and what else is going on in the world today.
There's definitely a level of freedom that comes with your experience here in terms of the sort of tools and facilities that I would never even dream of being able to use. Also, you're speaking with tutors and technicians who have seen artists come and go, and with that comes experience and a lens, and they can see things that are in you that you might not be able to see. So I found myself many times having conversations with technicians about this is what I want to do, and it can just be a subtle, have you tried this? And that goes such a long way. Cross-pollinating across artists in painting or photography or print or textiles, and it's just really, really awesome to see, because you then leave here not only making new friends, but you went through this together.
A lot of students, they see a tutor to be here and have a similar journey as they do. But as a tutor who doesn't have English as my mother tongue, and as an Asian, as a migrant, as a queer, as a non-cisgender man, is sometimes quite inspiring. The struggle or the journey that I used to have is kind of informing me and benefiting my teaching.
We got like a really decent studio space, and this is what I didn't expect in the beginning, because I thought it would be like everyone has only a table, even we are making sculpture, but actually we do have a lot of space. Because of Alcea, I tried to show my dedication to my research. This one-year course gave me a chance for me to understand myself better.
I think collaboration is a lovely secret hidden aspect of sculpture. I think intrinsically it's quite a collaborative process. Quite often, to realise larger works, you need more than one person really to physically engage with them. And so there is a kind of tendency towards collaboration, I think, in this practice.
I enjoy using the bench area and things on my days that I'm not teaching, or in the evenings and stuff. And that's one of the things that I've liked about working alongside students, because you have a different kind of conversation about doing things, because they can witness you, not as someone who can do all this chat about this, that and the other, but actually the doing of things.
I work in stone with hand tools, and I have done for about 20 years now. And as I grow old, my body weakens, and I was very concerned that I wouldn't be able to continue my practice. So I've come here to learn how to harness digital technologies, and the technicians here are amazing. What I love about the Royal College is that they allow you to really wrestle with stuff with people who are clearly remarkable in their fields, and yet you're treated as an equal. I'm finding myself inspired. And also what I dreamed of doing is actually happening within weeks. That's pretty amazing.
One thing that would stand out in terms of summarizing MA sculpture is that it's experiential, it's spatial. We work with not just relationships between objects, but relationships of objects in space, and our engagement with those spaces and those objects, which are increasingly thought of differently with questions such as sustainability, but also future technologies. The range of learning and teaching that takes place on MA Sculpture means that as a student, you can pick and choose in terms of electives or seminars or workshops or processes and methods in ways that allow you to develop a very individual approach and body of work that then has its public showing, not just in Festus, but in the final exhibition.